Shaanxi, China, is experiencing one of the most severe floods in decades. Days of torrential rain have turned mountain valleys into raging rivers. Roads that were once busy are now submerged beneath rushing floodwaters, and villages are completely cut off and isolated. The stillness of the countryside has been replaced by the deafening roar of cascading torrents. Bridges twisted by whirlwinds, highways bent and broken under the weight of landslides, all stand as stark evidence of human helplessness in the face of nature. Not only have national highways been crippled, but even the narrow rural paths leading to agricultural villages have been completely severed. Residents are trapped in isolation, unable to access vital relief. Rescue teams, despite their best efforts, are forced to carve paths through the rubble, attempting to deliver basic supplies to those in need. In urban centers, the situation is no better. Low-lying residential areas have transformed into vast pools of water, floodwaters rising to fill yards and ground floors with thick, suffocating mud. Schools, clinics, and small shops have been stripped bare, covered with sludge and debris, leaving only devastation behind. For many residents, the first task was simply shoveling mud out of their front doors. But the greater concern was clean water. Authorities rushed to open emergency shelters, turning community halls, schools, and public buildings into temporary refuges for displaced families. Meanwhile, workers and medical teams raced to restore safe drinking water, repair drainage systems, and disinfect reservoirs threatened by contamination. The devastation in rural areas was even harsher. Fields of golden rice and lush corn were buried under murky brown floodwaters. The raging torrents swept away fertile topsoil, leaving behind gravel and sand. For farmers, this was not just a material loss, it was the destruction of an entire harvest season. Irrigation canals clogged with debris, small bridges that once carried tools and livestock collapsed under the current. Without these arteries, recovery was almost impossible. The barren fields illustrated the brutality of the disaster. Agricultural teams rushed in with seeds and fertilizer, urging farmers to replant immediately, warning that any delay would mean a failed autumn harvest. At the same time, reservoirs and hydraulic systems came under extreme pressure. Authorities were forced to conduct controlled discharges to prevent catastrophic dam failures. Images of workers reinforcing embankments and patching weakened spillways before the next storm embodied both fragility and determination. The electrical grid collapsed, plunging entire districts into darkness. Substations drowned, utility poles swept away, leaving homes and businesses without power for days. Hospitals and rescue centers had to rely on mobile generators. Meanwhile, communication lines crumbled. Fiber optic cables snapped in eroded trenches, and cell towers lay collapsed on isolated slopes. Rescue crews trudged knee-deep in mud to reconnect signals, knowing that without reliable communication, coordinating aid convoys was nearly impossible. The story of Shaanxi is not only about a natural disaster, but also a sobering reminder of society's fragility when infrastructure collapses. In each of these moments, humanity confronts its limits, standing between the ferocity of nature and the bare necessities of survival. In the aftermath of the flood, the government initiated a phased response, beginning with the urgent clearing of mud and debris. Bulldozers and dump trucks worked tirelessly, day and night, reopening critical highways that had been clogged with landslides and abandoned vehicles. Once the main arteries were cleared, assessment teams fanned out to evaluate the damage at schools, hospitals, and public infrastructure. Budgets were quickly reallocated, supplemented by provincial and county funds, to enable swift repair operations. Entire municipal fleets were repurposed into disaster response units, pumping floodwaters from tunnels, towing away wrecked vehicles, and removing mounds of debris that had buried city blocks. Heavy machinery from neighboring provinces was dispatched to speed up the process. Volunteers, both local and from afar, joined the effort, shoveling mud and hauling rubble in residential areas. For many communities, recovery began not with formal assistance but with neighbors lending each other tools, sharing food, and offering shelter. This spirit of solidarity filled the gaps while they waited for official aid to arrive. The agricultural sector became a focal point of concern. Officials warned that unless farmland was cleared quickly, the autumn harvest would be lost entirely. Cooperative groups mobilized tractors to scrape away rocks, while agricultural agencies coordinated seed distribution and organized fertilizer supplies. It became clear that rural stability hinged on the timely restoration of crop production. For farmers, the sight of tractors plowing through silt-laden fields was both a reminder of hardship and a symbol of hope. Electricity restoration remained another urgent priority. Engineers worked relentlessly to replace fallen poles, rewire substations, and stabilize transformers. Mobile power units were dispatched to hospitals and emergency command centers, ensuring that life-saving equipment could keep running. Meanwhile, telecommunications companies scrambled to restore fiber-optic networks and mobile coverage, often improvising with temporary towers and portable equipment. These makeshift solutions carried the burden of reconnecting families desperate to hear from their loved ones. Yet, despite the progress, many challenges persisted. In some districts, residents remained stranded in high-rise buildings, their stairwells filled with mud and lower floors submerged. Supplies had to be delivered by boats or carried in by foot, and the psychological toll began to weigh heavily. For the elderly, children, and those with chronic illnesses, the uncertainty of when normalcy would return deepened their anxiety. Health risks loomed large. With sanitation systems crippled and water sources contaminated, fears of waterborne diseases grew rapidly. Emergency teams distributed chlorine tablets, while health officials launched vaccination drives in temporary shelters. Public health became just as urgent a battlefield as infrastructure repair. The flood also exposed weaknesses in urban planning. Many neighborhoods had grown haphazardly over the years, without adequate drainage systems. When torrential rain struck, narrow alleyways and unpaved lots became flood channels. Experts began to stress the importance of long-term urban resilience, redesigning drainage, reinforcing embankments, and investing in early warning systems. Local media captured poignant scenes: families sitting on rooftops, clutching what little they had salvaged, volunteers passing buckets of mud hand to hand, and children playing with makeshift toys amid piles of debris. These images revealed the human face of the tragedy, reminding viewers that beyond statistics and official reports were lives profoundly disrupted. As recovery moved forward, the central question lingered: would this be only another cycle of destruction and repair, or would it mark the beginning of a serious investment in resilience? The balance between immediate recovery and future preparedness became the true test for Shaanxi's leaders. For now, people's hope rested on the belief that through unity and persistence, their province would rise again from the mud. The scale of agricultural destruction became a central concern as weeks passed. Vast tracts of farmland, once green and fertile, now resembled barren wastelands strewn with rocks, silt, and debris. Local cooperatives mobilized farmers to clear fields, scraping away layers of sludge, while agricultural agencies coordinated the urgent delivery of seeds. The government distributed fertilizer and basic tools, emphasizing that restoring rural livelihoods was not just about economic stability but also about food security for the entire region. Every day of delay threatened to compound the crisis, and the urgency was palpable in villages where empty fields stretched to the horizon. Community resilience began to shine through. Families who had lost nearly everything found strength in sharing with their neighbors, cooking meals together, pooling resources, and even constructing makeshift shelters from salvaged wood and tarps. This communal spirit helped many endure the long wait for official aid. Local leaders organized volunteer brigades, coordinating debris removal and assisting the elderly. Such grassroots solidarity highlighted how, in times of disaster, human bonds often prove stronger than any government directive. The strain on infrastructure remained visible everywhere. Reservoirs, dams, and levees had suffered intense pressure during the peak of the flood. Inspectors spread out across the province, patching weak points and reinforcing embankments before the next storm could strike. Controlled releases of water, though necessary to prevent dam failures, left downstream communities nervous and uneasy, constantly watching river levels with fear. The fragility of these water control systems underscored the urgent need for long-term investment in stronger, more resilient infrastructure. Electricity and communication systems slowly clawed back to life. Engineers erected new poles, repaired substations, and rolled out mobile power generators to restore critical services. Telecommunications crews braved mud-filled valleys to reconnect fiber-optic cables, while temporary mobile towers were erected on trucks and hilltops to restore signals. For families who had endured days without contact, the first phone call to a distant relative was an emotional reminder of connection and survival. But as life-supporting services returned, a deeper question lingered: how would Shaanxi prepare for the next disaster? Experts argued that climate change was intensifying the frequency and severity of extreme rainfall events. Urban sprawl without proper drainage, coupled with deforestation in surrounding mountains, had worsened flood impacts. The tragedy became a wake-up call that piecemeal repairs would not suffice. Systemic reform was needed. Calls grew louder for investment in sustainable infrastructure, improved early warning systems, and stricter regulations on land use and construction. For many residents, however, the focus was still immediate: cleaning their homes, reopening schools, and rebuilding livelihoods. Emergency shelters slowly emptied as families returned to salvage what they could from waterlogged houses. Shops reopened with limited supplies, children returned to makeshift classrooms, and farmers began replanting fields, even if it meant starting small. The path to normalcy was long and uneven, but it carried the weight of determination. The flood in Shaanxi was both a story of devastation and a testament to resilience. Roads would be rebuilt, bridges repaired, and fields replanted, but the scars left behind would serve as a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving power. More importantly, it was a test of whether leaders and communities could learn from the disaster, to not only recover but to prepare. Because in a world of shifting climates and increasingly unpredictable weather, survival is no longer just about endurance, it is about foresight. As viewers, we are left with a sobering truth. Disasters strip away illusions of control, but they also reveal the courage and unity of people bound together by hardship. Shaanxi's story is not just about destruction, it is also about the quiet strength of communities who refuse to surrender. And as the province rebuilds, one lesson echoes clearly: resilience is not merely about bouncing back, but about building forward stronger than before.